Technologic. Buy it, use it, break it, fix it, crash it, change it, melt, upgrade it, charge it, point it, zoom it, press it, snap it, work it, quick erase it. Technologic.
Apple designs the Mac, along with OS X. I life and I work. It leads the digital music revolution with iPods and iTunes. It reinvented the mobile phone with iPhone and App Store. And it's defining the future of mobile media and computing with iPad.
In the last quarter of 2012, Apple sold 26.9 million iPhones, 14.0 million iPads, 4.9 million Macs, and 5.3 million iPods. Even though Apple's products are designed in California, they are assembled in China. The decline of manufacturing can lead to the loss of other kinds of jobs, a major factor in the economy right now. This has got Americans saying,
"They took our job! They took our job! They took our job! They took our job! They took our job!"
Why do they manufacture their products in China? Is it only because workers are cheaper? No. Rather, Apple's executives believe the vast scale of overseas factories as well as the flexibility, diligence and industrial skills of foreign workers have outpaced their American counterparts. One former executive described how the company relied upon a Chinese factory to revamp iPhone manufacturing just weeks before the device was due on shelves. Apple had redesigned the iPhone screen at the last minute, forcing an assembly line overhaul. New screens began arriving at the plant near midnight. A foreman immediately roused 8,000 workers inside the company's dormitories, according to the executive. Each employee was given a biscuit and a cup of tea, guided to a workstation, and within half an hour started a 12-hour shift, fitting glass screens into beveled frames. Within 96 hours, the plant was producing over 10,000 iPhones a day. The speed and flexibility is breathtaking, the executive said. There's no American plant that can match that.
One of Apple's key supplier is Foxconn. Other companies who use Foxconn manufacturing services are Samsung, Microsoft, HP, Dell, Amazon, Sony, and many more.
In societal ethics, there are two opinions on Apple and their suppliers like Foxconn. Some believe that labour in companies like Foxconn are unethical and against human rights, while others believe Apple and Foxconn are the best thing to happen to Chinese labour. These are their stories. I'm going to be analysing the Apple Supplier Code of Conduct and will be reviewing the working conditions in factories like Foxconn. The first sentence of the Apple Supplier Code of Conduct states that it is committed to ensuring that working conditions in Apple's supply chain are safe and that workers are treated with respect and dignity. Workers at Foxconn's Chengdu factory, which manufactures Apple products, must reportedly sign a pledge promising they will not commit suicide. This document starts off good, telling employees to take advantage of the helpline, the complaints line, or the trade union hotline. But then they note in bullet points that the employees agree to when signed. Agreeing not to harm myself or others, and agreeing that the company has acted properly in accordance with relevant laws and regulations and will not sue the company. I believe this to be inhumane treatment and definitely counts as mental coercion. In another act of inhumane treatment to a sensitive subject, after a spout of suicides in 2010 at the Shenzhen factory, nets were installed in an effort to prevent employees jumping. In 2010, Mike Daisy visits the Foxconn factory in Shenzhen, and this is what he had to say about who he met during shift change.
At that gate, I met workers who were 14 years old. I met workers who were 13 years old. I met workers who were 12.
The same year that Mike Daisy visited China, there were 91 cases of underage labour found by Apple's audit of its suppliers. An audit carried out by the Fair Labour Association, which was ordered by Apple last year, finds illegal overtime. Employees at Foxconn typically worked more than 60 hours a week during peak periods. In the report carried out by SACOM, Students and Scholars Against Corporate Misbehaviour, Foxconn and Apple failed to fulfill promises, predicaments of workers after the suicides, finds that workers do not have adequate training on usage of chemicals and do not have regular on-post health examination. A number of interviewees even complained that they suffer from allergy, but the management does not probe into the adverse health impact of workers. Workers also highlight the problem of poor ventilation and inadequate personal protective equipment. An article states that the Foxconn suicides that started in 2010 are due to oppressive work conditions that include standing for 8 hours or more without a break. One worker said that he constantly wanted to drop something on the floor so he could bend down to pick it up while working. Due to the long hours standing, if he had the chance to lie or squat down on the floor, it would be the most enjoyable moment during the workday, so he could get the chance to rest. The World Socialist website states that in an article called China's Sweatshops Exploit Students, that major corporations like Foxconn engage in large-scale exploitation of students as cheap labour, with the support of Chinese authorities at every level. While the practice is justified as a form of vocational education, students spend long hours in regimented conditions carrying out routine, repetitive tasks. Most employees of Foxconn spend a day performing repetitive tasks. The southern campus in Chengdu, which is a construction site, does not provide basic facilities like toilets, a canteen or lockers. A report carried out by SACOM last year has found that living conditions remain cramped and unpleasant. According to the report, which found 20 to 30 people typically sharing 3-bedroom apartments stocked with bunk beds, use of high-energy electrical appliances such as hairdryers, kettles and laptops is prohibited. Health and safety is not a major concern. 137 were injured after using poisonous chemicals to clean iPhone screens, which I'm sure no safety information was provided on. The factory provides safety training to workers, but it is not very informative, so the workers do not feel as if they are receiving appropriate health and safety training. The majority of points in the sections Labour and Human Rights and Health and Safety in Apple's Supplier Code of Conduct are being violated, which I feel prove that factories like Foxconn to be unethical and against human rights.
Since the news about Foxconn was released, Apple have made serious changes to improve the way their supplier handles business. For the past 7 years, they have been publishing reports on the audits that they now perform regularly. Results from the first audits found that some of the things the media released about Foxconn were true, but may have been blown out of proportion. They required facilities to develop management systems to drive compliance with Apple's limits on work hours and required days of rest. Apple also worked on preventing injury by ensuring workers use the proper safety equipment, have been trained appropriately, and regular maintenance checks are made on all equipment. They also required Foxconn to handle, store and dispose of hazardous chemicals properly by establishing chemical management procedures. In 2010, they found that 10 facilities had violated their underage labour laws. One of these had a total of 42 underage employees. Apple has since terminated business with the facility. To prevent the future hiring of underage workers, Apple launched a training initiative in November 2010. Topics included China law labour, relationships with schools and labour brokers, record-keeping systems, protection of juvenile workers, and remediation of underage labour cases. Apple has helped the underage workers return to their families and get back to school. They required the facilities to pay for their educational expenses and to pay them 6 months' wages. Foxconn has raised basic wage 4 times in the past 3 years. in some areas doubling the starting level pay. A typical Foxconn worker spends 50 hours a week on the job and gets about $400 a month, which is about $2 an hour. Compare this to factories in the area 6 years ago, the wages ranged from $115 to $155 a month. The peak suicide rate for Foxconn came in 2010 when it reported a total of 12 completed suicides at all its Chinese plants. On a per capita basis, this was below the suicide rate for China as a whole, but everyone at Foxconn recognised it as an emergency. From Apple's 2013 report, there was a 92% compliance with the 60-hour work week. They are now tracking 1 million workers weekly to make sure this figure does not drop. In 2012, Apple became the first technology company to join the Fair Labour Association. The FLA conducted the largest scale independent audit in its history per Apple's request. They also continued their efforts to protect foreign contract workers who moved country to work in Foxconn. Since 2008, they have reimbursed workers with $13.1 million. Anyone concerned with inequality and poverty should thank the likes of Apple and Foxconn. Global inequality is actually falling and the formerly poor are getting rich. Foxconn facilities are in no way any worse than any other factories in China and keep improving thanks to Apple. That's why I believe Apple and Foxconn are the best thing ever to happen to Chinese labour.
We the consumers want our shiny electronics. We want them cheap, yet we want them built by well-paid, healthy workers. But we can't have both. Do we care enough about Chinese factory conditions to pay nearly twice as much for our phones, tablets, cameras, TVs, computers, GPS units, camcorders, music players, DVD players, digital video recorders, networking gear, and stereo equipment? Not everybody will say yes. Sooner or later we'll have to make a choice. The fault, dear Brutus, is not just at Apple or in China. It's also in ourselves.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Cutie, cutie, make sure you move your booty. Shake that titty, now the city of sin. And hey, shorty, I know you wanna party. If the way your body looking, make me really feel naughty. Who we are? We the stars, steady rocking all of y'all's boulevards and looking hard without bodyguards. What I can, I am, and still I stand with still mic in hand. So come on, mama, dance to the drummer.